Hello, everyone. My name is Gitika, and today I am very excited and honored to be interviewing a very special space champion, astronaut Dr. Cady Coleman. Dr. Coleman is a chemist, an engineer, a former United States Air Force colonel, and a retired NASA astronaut. She is a veteran of 2 Space Shuttle missions and departed the ISS on May 23rd, 2011, as a crew member of Expedition 27 after logging 159 days in space. She has incredible experiences in the military and throughout her work at NASA, including serving as Chief of Robotics for the Astronaut Office. As you can see, Dr. Coleman is a visionary leader and scientist in the aerospace industry and is incredibly passionate about all of her work. And I'm very excited to learn about what got her intrigued in aerospace and how her journey went, along with the exciting experiments she conducted on the ISS. So welcome, Dr. Coleman. Thank you so much for taking your time to inspire the next generation of aerospace leaders.
Well, thanks for having me. It's something I feel really strongly about, helping with if I can.
Yeah, before we get into understanding what ignited your passion for aerospace, could you first kind of tell us how your typical day runs? I know usually there isn't a typical day, but how does your day usually run?
So do you mean a day like, now after I'm
Casual day.
retired,
Yes.
retired from NASA?
Yes.
They're all really different. I'm involved in a number of things, and I think it comes from the fact that I feel like having been selected as an astronaut, there's a certain feeling fortunate, but I also felt qualified. But no matter what, it's a privilege, and it's a wonderful job that a lot of people wanted to have when I was selected, and it builds in a certain responsibility to really do your best, and it doesn't go away when you leave. And so I'm just pretty excited about looking for opportunities to be able to make sure that we are growing, the U's of the future, Gitika. And those come in, everything from consulting to for movies and museums and places like that that are going to maybe make displays when they could show a few more faces and invite a few more people in, and sometimes the voice of the astronaut, they just go, oh, she told us we should do that, we should probably listen. So I take that responsibility really seriously, and so that means I have a hodgepodge of most of my days, but I did just get to spend the last couple days at the Smithsonian the Smithsonian Natural History Museum, which is just this whole, you would think maybe I'd be with the Air and Space Museum, but I'm on the board of this one partly because it's about like the whole universe, including all the things on our planet. And I think they're all included in our job description.
Yeah, and I have to say, when I was a little kid, I even have a picture of me imitating an astronaut in the Air and Space Museum in DC. And I would go to that museum probably every like 2 or 3 months. And it was like the best time ever. So I can definitely attest to the fact that museums do make an impact and something that really got me intrigued with space.
I'm
And
so glad. And actually, a friend was the director of that museum until recently, and her goal was to make sure that every visitor that walked in the door, that maybe this one, maybe she would be the first to walk on Mars, and we had to make sure that she could see herself in that museum.
yeah, and I can say that I was definitely inspired. And, I have to ask the question, after completing your first space flight, you orbited Earth 256 times, traveled over 6 million miles, and logged a total of 15 days, 21 hours, 52 minutes, and 21 seconds in space, which is crazy to think about. And so, what was that experience like when you saw Earth in a completely different perspective? And kind of what were those emotions running through your mind?
When you say those statistics, that was my first flight, STS 73. And the most important thing about that flight was that it was an experiment flight. And you might think, oh, that's so logical. She's a scientist, experiment flight. And it is logical in that way. But the most important thing about it was that we were like a pathfinder mission, like a practice mission for the actual space station. Like, how are we going to do experiments up there? How are we going to make it so that the crew knows enough about doing the experiments, but make sure that the people on the ground who really know that stuff, and it's their experiment, that they really have the insight that they need. And so I loved being part of a team that was serving science in that way. And so when I actually got to go up to the space station and live there, I felt like I just arrived in this place I'd been helping to build, if that makes sense. So we had at the time, that mission was the longest shuttle mission at the time. And I remember this feeling as we were coming in for a landing, like, I mean, like before the landing, we're strapping in and getting all ready. And I just thought, it is too soon. Why are we coming home? We have so much good work to do up here, and we are not done yet. So, 16 days in space was not enough. And that's one of the reasons I was so happy to go back and be able to actually live on the space station.
Yeah, and a lot of times people ask, whether it be friends or other people in the community, like, why are we investing so much in experiments on the ISS? And personally, because I had an opportunity to intern last summer, I realized the value of doing space in a completely new environment without gravity or with microgravity and the things we can discover. But I want to hear it from you. Why do you think it's important to invest in experiments to be conducted on the ISS and to be able to invest in space in general?
Well, let's just say that you're a person that needs glasses. And then as soon as you get this tool, these glasses, and you put them on, you see the world differently, right? And
Mhm.
so by going up to space, first of all, we see the Earth differently. And in my case, it's about kind of looking down at the whole Earth. And we like to talk about not seeing borders. Actually, you can see borders. You could see differences in land use between countries, but it really just has this sort of, I mean, it's one place. And the fact that it would be so important, I mean, maybe it's kind of cool to come from one place or another place on that planet, but we're so clearly all from the same place. And so I just felt like if only we could all be connected to each other, we could solve anything down here, on Earth. And so there's that idea of that kind of a tool. But there's another tool, which is just being able to collect data in a different way. And one of my favorite examples is combustion. I mean, I don't know, just from looking at things burning and blowing up and all those kinds of things, all those things happen really fast. And by going to space, one of the effects, if you think about a candle flame, having that sort of
Mhm.
tall, skinny shape, is those lighter gases are rising. That's what makes that shape.
Mhm.
So up in space where everything is weightless, now suddenly those lighter gases are not rising like hot air balloons. They're just hanging out next to the flame. And so it turns out that means that we don't have like this ton of new oxygen rushing in and these gas things
Mhm.
going off. It makes it a simpler thing to study because measurements that we have to make in milliseconds, like 10 to the minus 6 seconds, here on the ground to determine the slope of a line. That's all we're trying to do is determine that. And we're at data points so fast, right? Well, up in space, we can make those same measurements over 30 or 40 seconds. So all of a sudden we can notice more things and we can see more things.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you for that example. I've never even read about something like that. So just having that perspective is, I think, incredible because I think of it more in the biology aspect. Like,
Mhm.
imagine what we could learn about ourselves in that type of environment because you're not having this element of gravity influencing our body and just the things we could understand because in space things happen differently, such as bone density loss. It's different in space than on Earth. And so things like that I've thought about, but not combustion. So that was definitely an interesting example. So yeah, thank you. And
Well, and biology is actually one of the most important things, like the most exciting things. It seems like every time we measure biological stuff up there, Gitika, we get surprises, things
wow.
that we didn't even think would be changing. And so, understanding that it's important for humans, not necessarily the 6 or 8 or 10 humans that are on a space station, but
Mhm.
the ones down on Earth. And I'm especially proud actually of our osteoporosis research because osteoporosis affects, mainly women. And we actually up in space, I mean, in a way, we're just really good experiment people because we lose bone very quickly up there. And that's sort
Mhm.
of the bad
Yeah.
news. So, what a woman who is about 70 years old loses in a year, I could lose in a month if I
Yeah.
didn't do anything. So, we're learning what are the things to do. And as a result, people like me are coming back I came back with all of the bone density that I left with, but not necessarily arranged and structured the same way.
Exactly. That's what excites me. Like, what was those influences? Like, what happened to those different genes? What was involved that we might be missing or not noticing here on Earth? It's just those different factors. And that I think that's what's so exciting about space.
Me too.
I also read how during one of your flights, you reported how you found or had spotted a UFO, which is in like an unidentified flying object. And I was curious, could you share what this moment was like? Because it's not every day you go around saying you found a UFO. So, what was this experience like? Did you think you were seeing things, or was there any, I guess like, what did you just feel at that moment?
Well, I hate to disappoint you. But I
Remind
was
me.
actually sharing a little bit about what life was like on board, and I actually made a joke about a UFO.
Oh, oh, okay.
And then I got to answer a lot of questions, and I learned probably not to make that joke. It was a pretty
Yeah, because I read it on an article and I was like, that is so cool. I can't believe I haven't learned. It was a joke. Okay.
and I could actually always tell, and I would fix it in my Wikipedia, but I like the imaginative idea. I mean, is it, I mean, first of all, if I mean, I think looking out, the fact that we're alone and the fact that there are, beings or whoever, have are maybe more technical than we are. Um, I just think that that's very possible. And I think that they'd be pretty likely to talk to the six people that were, orbiting the planet before they came down and talked to the rest of them. I think it'd be a good move. So I like the fact that it could be possible to make people realize that lots of things they thought were impossible are probably possible.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's really nice to think that there could be life. And a lot of times, I think Hollywood has made aliens to seem like big green monsters, but really they could just be very tiny bacteria we can't see. So just like thinking about it like that, I feel like there could be, a slight possibility. We just haven't uncovered or discovered that yet.
It's true. And I had the extreme privilege to interview a woman named Dr. Jill Tarter, and she was part of the search for intelligent life. And SETI, it's called SETI. And if you watch the movie Contact with Jodie Foster, the book written by Carl Sagan, Jill Tarter is actually the person that inspired that book. And not everything in that movie, not everything in it is exactly Jill, but it's about one person and actually, a community that kind of grew together thinking, well, let's say we're not alone. How would we notice?
Mhm.
How would we figure this out? And the way that they did it, and I hadn't understood this before, was to realize that they'd have to be space travelers, they'd have to be technologically advanced. And so
Yeah.
how would they show us that advance? And so they look at literally like smart doubling of frequencies or things that would not, they look for signatures that would not happen in nature, that are really clever and would have to be done by someone that understood how to do something technical. And I just find that a really interesting journey, and so many different kinds of people still part of it. And so that's the search for intelligent life in the universe. And now, both are important in that we're, finding more and more clues for the search for biological life, which is, I tell people, it's probably not going to be cute, right? It's just going to be microbes and, small and cellular, and I think we'll be really pleased to find that too.
Yeah, no, I'm very, very excited. I think a lot of advancements have been happening, especially over the past 10 years, technology wise. I think everything has been so rapid in the industry. And I think that makes way for another 10 years what's going to happen. And, I'm curious from your opinion or perspective, do you think that Mars travel is something in the near future, or do you think there's still a lot of scientific or medical advancements that need to happen for us to be able to go to Mars, or humans to go to Mars?
What if I said yes and yes?
That'd be exciting, very
it,
exciting.
it depends on your definition of near. Is
Mhm,
Mars coming? Yes. It is
mhm.
definitely something that will happen, in my future. And I mean, unless something happens, right, and definitely within your future, because it's the most logical place to go,
Yeah,
and most likely to, support life. And it's also, a place that, I mean, we've been doing a lot of work. People say, when are we going to Mars? And I go, we have been on Mars for years.
yeah.
I mean, look at all these rovers and the advances as you go from rover to rover. And as a human spaceflight person, sometimes people think that we're like in opposition, like the robot people and the human spaceflight people. But really, I mean, it is together. Like, I don't want to go to Mars until we know enough
Yeah,
about it to mitigate the risks that we can mitigate, right? and more quickly we're going to go to the moon. And I really am very happy that, basically NASA is committed to sending the first woman and the first person of color to be landing on the moon. And that's just so important because I think we've come a long way. But sometimes unless you just really make a point of it, you're going to leave people behind. And you know what? It's a race you are never going to win. When you want to do something really, really hard, if you do it with a team of people that all have a lot in common, you are not going to be the winners because there are going to be solutions you will leave on the table. I'm actually fascinated on this board that I'm on for the Smithsonian. The president of one of the Alaskan tribes is on the board, and her point
Wow.
of view is astonishing, really, where, we'll say, well, this is kind of everybody's reality. And she will say, this is not the reality in my village. And in terms of what motivates people, what's important to them. And even a really interesting thing when you think about how far should we as humans plan ahead? And they talk about the shadow that each of us makes kind of back to, our parents and their parents
Yeah.
in the shadow
Hmm.
forward. And everyone on the board was like, wow, that means we're really thinking about what will our museum be like, not in 10 years, but in 100 years, and that it matters. And I thought it was really interesting that to us, many of us on the board, that was a bit of a revelation to think about it in terms of lifespan of people that you're related to, that your grandkid would be going to that museum in the future. And yet for Alexana, that she said, well, that's actually the way we grow up thinking. So different points of view, very necessary. And I think that commitment to diversity makes lunar exploration so exciting.
Yeah, I definitely am very excited for Artemis. I remember I was writing this little essay and I was like saying how I miss not being in the Apollo historic mission going to the moon, but now I'm able to witness Artemis, which I think is even more exciting, or equally as exciting. So I'm very excited for Artemis, but also going to Mars. Like you said, we've already had a presence, and it's about figuring out what really
Right.
Mars is like and how we can send humans there. And I think that's going to bring a lot of technological advancements. A lot of times people ask, why invest in going to Mars? What's the point? We already have robots there. But it's about that challenge of trying to send humans. We're going to advance telemedicine. We're going to advance our technology, what we know about cars and vehicles. And it's just everything in general is going to advance. And that's very exciting.
It's true, and probably we're going to walk further that in the first day of walking on Mars than some of the rovers went in years. But Gitika, I have a question for you. You were saying that it really was going to mean a lot to you to see people landing on the moon in your lifetime with your own eyes. Why do you think that is important to you?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think because a lot of times, like in this generation, we look back like, oh, like 50 years ago, this happened. Or,
Mm.
we went to, and nothing happened I mean, in our eyes, nothing amazing, like historic like that happened for another 50 years. But a lot of internal technological advancements happen, but it's not as exciting. And I feel like a lot of times things in the space industry are kind of covered and it's not brought to the public's eye. People don't realize the importance of space. But when you are physically sending humans again, and that too humans of very diverse backgrounds. You're seeing like a woman going up there. It kind of gives you the confidence, many other girls, many other minorities, that, oh, I can do it too if they're doing it. And also brings attention to this mission. It brings younger kids like, oh, wait, aerospace. Because I feel like a lot of times during the Apollo mission, I've interviewed many people who were there during that time. And they're like, that's what inspired me to get into the industry. And I
Mm.
think Artemis has the potential to come out to billions of young children out there and kind of inspire them to be like, oh, I want to be like them when I grow up. So I think Artemis is kind of this, next step to get to Mars, and it can inspire the next generation to really, get after this Artemis generation, just like the Apollo generation. So I really think that it's just a moment of like, we've been a part of this historic mission, and inspires a lot of kids
Mhm.
to pursue aerospace careers.
I really think that too, and it worked that way for me. I was 8 years old when we landed on the moon. And the joke is that my mom woke up my brother and not me, but we were sleeping on the same couch, right, at our grandparents' house, and so it's pretty much the same. And so I did get to see it, but it didn't make me. And I grew up in a family of explorers, really, and the the fact that exploration was very real, that was very real to me. But the fact that I could be one of those explorers really never hit me until I was in college. So it really went all the way to college, until I went to a lecture by Sally Ride, and just seeing somebody that kind of looked and felt like me and really made a difference to me. And I think she probably inspired the guys, a lot as well. But I think I'm not the only woman that was inspired, and that's why I think when people have the power to make a commercial or to write a textbook, or I mean anything that basically people are going to see, especially vulnerable people like kids and young people who are still deciding who they could be. I'll give you an example. We were going to the National Geographic was doing a special on the space station, live from the space station, and it just happened to be a time that there were only guys on the space station. And to me, I helped with it from the ground. I wasn't up there, but I helped with it from the ground to make sure that we incorporated part of the video that they would show in the background and in between segments, that would show women and people of color working at NASA, because we are so much of the picture. But if you only take this narrow slice, I think of, a 9-year-old girl watching this cool special at home on a Friday night, and there's a message that comes and they don't even quite know it's happening that says, by the way, this is probably not you. And we can't afford to lose those people.
Yeah, I think that's very powerful. And yeah, that's a great mission. I have one girl, she's like 8 years old. Her name is Ryan, and she's a kindergartner. And she was saying that Dr. Sian Proctor, when she went to space, it made her see like, oh, I'm a African American woman. I'm an African American girl, but I can go to space too, just like Dr. Proctor did. And she was telling me like she's like Dr. Proctor inspired her to become an astronaut, and she's only in kindergarten. And if we continue that, diversity, and we consider, we continue showing people out there what people are doing and not just keep them as hidden figures, I think it really is powerful.
I do too, and I think it goes beyond even the bigger things like you just mentioned, where Cyan's also, I know you know this, but she's also a poet and she's an artist, and so she's inspiring poets and artists to do that too. And I actually like to show a picture of my crew that I was on the space station with, the American and the Italian, as well as the space shuttle crew that was up there. And so we're meeting President Obama. So it's basically me and 9 guys, or I didn't even really count. And I say, well, who stands out in this picture? And everyone's wearing a dark suit except for me. I'm wearing a bright green shirt. And I go, so I know I stick out for that reason. I'm also the only woman. President Obama is the only president. He's the only person of color. But even these people in this picture, even the identical, Kelly twins, Scott and Mark, even though they look identical, they might talk identically, they're each very different people. And so, across that, even though people can look the same, there's a lot of different parts of your individuality that are going to reinforce to somebody else this could be them.
Exactly. Yeah, the different careers. A lot of times, I think people have these stereotypes that they have to go into math or science to be a part of the industry, but there's a lot of art involved. There's a lot of policy involved. It's just
Hmm.
space is kind of its own little world. And I'm curious. You were saying how you were there to see the launch of the first man going on the moon when you were 8, but then when you were in college, it really solidified your passion for becoming an astronaut. So I'm kind of curious. Can you kind of share this journey of what was that aha moment for you to be like, I want to do this?
It absolutely was that moment in that auditorium, sitting in that chair, looking at that woman in front of that blackboard. The fact that she was well educated and passionate about learning something and really always
Yeah.
learning. I think it was that. And also, I mean, so it wasn't just like, oh, she looks and feels like me, but then you look a little further, I'm like, wow, we have some other things in common too. And one of them was wanting to be that person like that was really good at whatever field they'd chosen, um, and good and curious and sort of always curious. But also she had this like adventure in her life. And I realized it was like a revelation to me, like, wow, I would actually like to fly airplanes too. And that's something that really had never occurred to me. And I worked in the library, in high school. And it doesn't mean I was just sort of all bookish, but I just that it wasn't so adventuresome. um, I had started doing sports in college and started developing in that way, but not in high school. So it really was that moment. But then and I think that I tell this story, but people say, well, how do you get to be an astronaut? And I'm not making fun of them when I say you fill out an application. And I think this could be like the most important thing that we talk about, really, is because, like, if you don't tell people who you are, they cannot pick you for the team.
Yeah.
And it's a hard thing to do. And I want to say, especially stereotypically for women and minorities, to say, hey, this is what I bring. I mean, do you want that? I would think you do. Um, and I think there's sort of a scale of like thinking that if you just write down your credentials and they're all on an application, that someone is going to look at that and go, I know who she is, and I think she should be on our team. That might happen. And then there's also, well, they're not going to get anything from that. I'm going to make sure they know. I'm going to tell them. And even if I only had a little part, I'm going to tell them I did a lot. I mean, there's that other end of maybe being braggy, right? And somewhere on that spectrum is the part that feels like you. And I'm going to say that if you're a woman or a minority, you might want to scooch a little bit more towards the being really factual and explicit. Give people the tools to pick you. And
Yeah.
that means sometimes I don't know, when you first read my biography at the beginning of the interview, I'm like, oh, I always worry that when you read all those things in a row, it makes people think, so there she was. She, was born, and then she just knew she had to head straight until she arrived, or until NASA said, oh, Cady, so glad you are here. When in fact, life is full of lots of
Yeah.
different intersections, and there is no right choice. And somebody like me, most people like me, did not always know if, right or left was the right way. And there really isn't just a right way. And I think it's really important for everybody to realize that, I don't know, it always seems like somebody else must have had a straighter path than yours. I see this over and over again. And it's, just look at the facts there. I mean, it's just not a good assumption. So throw that part of I don't know if this could be me out. And also, when you are filling out that application or meeting someone and saying, hey, this is me, you do something really cool. I thought maybe I could come check it out. Talk about the things that you do that you're proud of. They don't have to, you might think that other people just have these things that sound like I was the president of this, I did that, these things. I worked in the library, I worked hard and I worked creatively and I learned a lot. But I also my mom was basically a single mom, and I helped bring up my little brother and sister and, cook meals and keep the house and all that kind of stuff. And that really, interfered with being able to get to a lot of different kinds of activities, even in Fairfax County, where you and I are both from. And so, I think, when somebody tells me that they ran a summer camp for kids, I'm like, wow. They know kids, they know safety, they know parents, they know running something. I want to go to space with that person. So don't be shy on these applications, and also being creative about thinking about how you tell people who you are. It is not cheating. It is not going too far towards that little braggy part. It is actually giving people what they need to pick you.
Wow, that's really powerful. I was reading this article the other day and it was like saying how women tend to brag less about themselves than, like usually other genders. And it was like kind of, it's not surprising in a way because I think historically women have always been kind of behind and always like not been afraid to kind of show themselves out there and brag about what they do. And I think what you said was just so powerful. Like you got to tell them why you're qualified, and not just assume that they know why you're qualified. And I think that's a very powerful statement. And you were saying how you didn't have a straight journey. It's not just like you're born and you became an astronaut. There was definitely a journey. And I'm curious, I'm sure you did. Did you have obstacles? And if so, what was that factor that kept you pushing to overcome your obstacles? Maybe advice you would give to kind of persist and push through?
Well, I think the unfortunate news, or maybe the fortunate news, is that um, in this world, you really do have to learn to advocate for yourself. And I'm doing some book writing right now, and which has really led to some introspection about lessons that I've learned over the course of my career. And I think one of the techniques that I have is I gather a team. I'm a very collaborative person. First of all, I figure things out by talking it out with people. It's just kind of my way. And so instead of when I have to figure something out by myself or like decide, oh, I don't know. I can do that, but it's often faster if I call my friend Diane and I go, okay, now this is my debate. I mean, because I just acknowledge that this is my way of sort of talking things out. It's me, so I kind of just embrace it, right? And so I just think it's important to to do whatever is your process. But I tend to, like, especially as my husband and I were both geographically single parents, and I gathered people that supported me in my family journey, that didn't think it was strange to commute for 20 something years between Houston and Massachusetts. So I try to bring that reinforcement, because I think one of the stereotypes that a lot of us carry is that people who have these kinds of jobs were always confident in every moment of their life, and always confident of which way to go in that, in determining that path. And I'd say everyone has confidence in certain ways and other ways in which they need support.
100%. Having that team, those mentors, that community you can rely on is like very
Mhm.
important. And the final, now that we're able to understand a little bit more about, your scientific love, your what you're excited about in the industry, as well as your passion and what got you into aerospace. The final question I ask all interviewers is, you've given plenty of advice throughout this interview, but what advice do you have for young students regarding their pursuit of a passion in the STEM field, aerospace, really just any career, something you wish you knew when you were in middle school, high school, or maybe even just beginning of college?
I wish I knew that it's not always, I mean, that you're not going to determine, like, I'm still learning new things. And it's one of the things I loved about my job as an astronaut. But I'm still thinking about, well, maybe I'd like to do that. I call it, trying on different kinds of jackets. I used to wear an astronaut jacket, and now sometimes I wear a grown-up kind of speaking jacket. Sometimes I wear a sweatshirt. And so they're not, you're probably going to be 20 different people over the course of your life. And so you're really just adopting one more, so to speak. And to me, that makes it a little less scary. And I hate to be one of the people, now as a parent, and I have a 21-year-old who's a wonderful guy. And I when you meet kids and you don't really know them, one of the first things, it's just so easy to ask, well, what are you thinking about doing? And I try so hard not to ask that, because I don't think you should know the answer. I think that you should have some things you're thinking about looking at, trying out. Gonna go to college and see if you like that. Gonna intern or get a job wherever and see if you like that. Um, but don't don't feel like you have to pick too soon. Really, like, you have a lot to learn about yourself. And I think by thinking of it as, I'm going to do this for now, and I'm going to pay attention to what I like about it, what I don't like about it, for the decisions I'm going to make later too.
I think that's very important. And also, I like to always emphasize it's like skills over degree. Like you can have a degree, but it's so important that you get the skills, because then you can apply to like 10 different jobs. And I feel like 10 years, we're going to have jobs we've never even heard of before. So it's about just adapting and having those skills and being ready to try new things. So, really, that was just listening you talk through your journey. It was incredibly inspiring, because that's something that I did not get from just reading your Wikipedia page, which had, all your accomplishments. So it was very nice to just kind of dig through what really your journey was like. And it was very inspiring as a woman myself to hear your story. So thank you so much, Dr. Coleman, for really taking your time to inspire me, and I'm sure many other students out there.
Well, thank you. And I look forward to wherever you end up in your journey, and the people that are listening, don't, I mean, I know we're talking about aerospace, but you know,
Really,
I mean, without the storytellers, without the people that can make what we see and do up there make sense to the whole rest of the world. I mean, all the arts, those are important as well. And so, you know, I don't know, think aerospace is pretty wonderful. And at the same time, realize that if you're inspired by space and space exploration, there is a place for you in this field, in the field of exploring the universe.
definitely. I have to agree. Thank you.